Hello and thanks for joining us. Today we're talking about SpecSizer Web. It is Power Systems' first online sales tool, and joining us to talk about it is Stephen Baker. Stephen is a marketing consultant with Electric Power. Stephen, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Edgar. Appreciate that.
So, Stephen, talk a little bit about why we are doing this.
Well, primarily we provide our dealers and our customers a lot of training on SpecSizer. SpecSizer is a tool to size generator sets, and if you know how to use it, you can size more competitively, and you can save the customer a lot of money.
Okay, so let's get into it. So, Stephen, this is the screen where they are going to access SpecSizer. They request a CWS ID and log in, and they go from there.
That's right, Edgar. Instead of the internet download that we had with the old SpecSizer Windows tool or the CD, now users simply, as you say, just request a corporate web security ID, and they can log into SpecSizer Web using this URL, specsizer.cat.com.
Okay.
After that, every user will see terms and conditions, and they select their language appropriate for their global region. SpecSizer is available in 8 languages. You have to accept the terms and conditions before you can use on through the tool and size a project. The first thing that a user would see is something called user preferences. This is just simply where you set all your defaults for every new project. It's editable. It's also site conditions are editable from a new project page, but that's all it is user preferences for every new project. Now here's a slide here that talks about a couple things that are required under user preferences before you can move forward in the tool. You must have a postal code. This is important for us for future reporting purposes. In addition to that, of course, you have to have your username, email, and phone number. And you can also here specify 5 different regions within the SpecSizer tool.
And why is that important?
Well, that's a new feature. With the old SpecSizer Windows tool, a user had to set their region during installation. And we think it's important in the future if, say, a dealer in North America is sizing a project in the Middle East, they would want to set their region to the Middle East in order to work with genset availability in that region. So here's a new option where a dealer or any user can set their region globally. Okay, and this just shows the 5 different regions in the SpecSizer tool. Again, that aligns with genset availability. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the default values that you would see on the site conditions page. A couple new features here that we've got are UL listed. That's really important for North America region. Any genset sold in North America has to be UL listed, so why would you want to see any generator set other than UL listed? Here's just a new filter that a dealer, a user can use to see only generator sets that
work for them.
That work for them, okay. That's right. And again, you've got your filter here, you've got your pull down for your language, 8 different languages in SpecSizer. And at this point in time, you need to save your site conditions before you move on through the tool here. Okay. And this just shows that you saved your preferences. And here, we just want to make sure that a user understands that there's help available in the tool. There's general help that you can look at on the main menu bar here, but you can also look at topic-specific help. No matter what page you're on in SpecSizer, you can access the help. Now I want to just talk a little bit more about how you move through the tool, how this works. There are 4 pages within SpecSizer Web: the define site conditions, the add loads, the select genset, and the data and reports. The first thing a user needs to do is define their site conditions, and of course they do that on the define site conditions page. You have to have a project name, input a project name before you can move on through the tool, and you have to save the project on this page before you can move forward. Okay. Now I want to just mention here that when you see the region on the define site conditions page, it's not editable at this point. If you would want to edit it, you'd have to go back to the user preferences page. Some more about define site conditions page here. Just want to talk about some new features that we've got here. One new feature is mission critical standby. We didn't have that type of duty cycle with SpecSizer Windows. That's an important new feature because it'll provide a load factor of 85% versus 70%. It's more for a data center application, useful for a data center application. Another new feature that we've got here is we break out the ambient and altitude measures between English and metric. You can see them in both measures. Another one here is expansion capacity percent. You can, for a site that needs some growth, future growth, you can specify up to 30% growth potential here with expansion capacity percent. We've also broken out the electricity supply for frequency and voltage just to make it easier for a user to see all the different voltages that would be available, say, for 60 hertz or for a 50 hertz project. Now, one more thing that I want to talk about here while we're on this page is I've got it underlined in red here. If product is available for the site conditions that you set, you'll see the range of product that's available here, and the bar will be green. The bar will be red if you've selected options, features that are not available. So just to give you an example here, EPA listed product is only available in North America, in the United States, 60 hertz projects. If you set 50 hertz here and EPA, you'd see a red bar. It wouldn't be available, okay? It's something that's important to understand. Now, once you set all your site conditions, you move on to your add loads page. And you can actually add loads here 2 different ways.
You have the icons there?
Yeah, you can select an icon and add a load, or you can use the add new load button here. I prefer to use the icons. It's just the way that I've always done it. You select an icon, load icon, and it'll bring up a load dialog. And so what you see here is you'll add a load. Here's an example where we add a 3-phase motor load. One thing I want to point out to you when you add a load here is that you have to click a button called Refresh Display to see some values called inrush, running, and nonlinear. It's not required that you refresh to display to size the project. It's only a display issue. If you want to see what those values are, click Refresh to Display. Another thing I want to point out here is something called starting method. I just want to make sure that every user knows that that's a feature that's available to help you size a smaller generator set. If you use a reduced voltage starter, it's not a new feature, but it's an important feature. If you use a reduced voltage starter, then many times as a cost versus benefit analysis, you can size a smaller gen set because a reduced voltage starter reduces your inrush. I want to make sure that every user understands that after you add your load or sequence your loads, you have to click the Submit button to save it, okay? Now here, simply we're just showing after you've added that first load, it just happened to be a 3-phase motor load here. The Add Loads page is sectioned into a step list and a load list, and the bottom portion is a load analysis summary. SpecSizer will size up to 99 loads and 99 steps, so you could have 99 steps in this first upper portion. For any step that you'd be highlighted on in that upper portion, you could have up to 99 loads in that middle portion. And then the bottom portion, what that's about is when you size a generator set, you're considering different sizing parameters, inrush, running, nonlinear, and this just shows you the roll-up of all those loads that you've added, how much of that load-specific requirement do you need when you size a gen set. In other words, your selected gen set in the program must at least meet or exceed those requirements. Now all we're showing here is we're adding another load. It just so happens we're adding lighting, and again, you can use the icons or you can use the Add New Load button here. One thing I want to point out here is the Save As template. This is a new feature that we have. It's what I call a library load. Many times a user will spec a project and they'll have a load that's identical, and here's a way for a user to create their own load type, save it as a library load, and when later they create a new project and select that Add Load button, they can then see their library loads.
Saves them a lot of time.
Yeah, that's what we're about, trying to make it easy for the user here. Now we're still on the Add Loads page here. We're just showing here where we added that light load. Again, nothing new here. We're just showing a new load added. Okay, now we've moved on from we've specified our site conditions, we've added our loads, we've sequenced our loads into different load steps, and now we just simply click on the Select Gen Set page and we automatically size our generator set. And you can see here that the program selected gen set has a check mark next to it on the left. And you can also see that that selected genset has a view command over to the right. So what we would want to do then is we would want to look at additional information about that genset that the program selected. So if we click on that view button, we can then move on through. This is just the bottom portion of that select genset page. But we can move on to a page that provides more detail about that selected genset.
Okay, so if you click View, then this is what you see.
Yeah, absolutely. This provides you additional technical information about the selected generator set. What you want to see is something called transient response. You want to see what is the frequency dip, what is the voltage dip of the loads that you've added to the project. The selected genset is tested, all our gensets are tested for transient response, and we need to make sure that the selected genset meets or exceeds the transient response requirements of the load. And so the starting and selection analysis page shows you that transient response analysis. There's also an alternator frame options page here. You could look at that. Here's a page that you can look at if you're looking for a way to maybe spec a smaller generator set. Maybe you can add an alternator or a generator that's bigger, that has more SKVA capability, instead of upsizing a generator set to a larger model. So this table then, alternator frame options, would show you all the information that you'd want to know about the alternators that would work with the selected genset. We also have a page here called Diagnostics. If you click on Diagnostics, you can see a lot of additional information about the genset, about the engine, about the alternator of the selected generator set. So a lot of technical information that we pull in automatically, save the user time, beneficial to the user. Again, if they're looking for ways to downsize the generator set, they can use that information as well. So if you wanted to get back to the select genset page, you just simply click on the back to generator set selection tab there that you see. Now I want to make sure that we talk about a few things that you can access on the select genset page. In addition to viewing, seeing the program size selected genset, you can also create a guide specification. Any job is going to have a guide spec associated with it. So this is something that an engineering consultant, a dealer, it's automatically created. You can either have a guide spec that is created for the program selected generator set, or a user can manually select any generator set in a list and create a guide spec that is associated with that manually selected genset. So it's just a lot of information about the genset in the project. Another thing that we have here is we have additional web links to sales support information. We've got a web link for a customer. We've also got a web link for a dealer. Say if a customer would want to get drawings specific to the generator set or a spec sheet, the customer could click on this link to get that type of information. You can also parallel generator sets on the Select Genset tab. You can parallel up to 25 generator sets. If the program will automatically parallel gensets if it's required, but you can also manually parallel gensets if you want. There's also a note here. I like to make sure that I talk about it. If you're looking for ways to downsize a generator set, there's a note that's a selection criterion note, and it'll tell you why the next smaller genset, smaller than the program selected genset, would fail. So, for example, it may fail on voltage dip restriction, and you would know then that you needed to work with the alternator, because the alternator has to do with SKVA, that has to do with voltage dip. These are some of the things I teach when I provide training, but it's an important note that if the user has had some training, it'll help them get down to sizing a smaller genset if it's possible. There's also another new feature called Compare Selected. This is a button, a feature that you can use to look at, to compare up to 4 generator sets. And you can look at about 35 different types of technical and sales support type of information. Compare that between 4 generator sets. Okay, let's go ahead and move on now. You set your user preferences that populates with any new project. Of course, that's editable on the site conditions page. You specified all your site conditions on the site conditions page. You've added and you sequenced your loads on the Add Loads page. You simply click the Select a Genset button, and you can see the program select a genset. You can also manually select a genset. You can see a lot of technical information about the selected genset on the Select Genset page. Now that you've sized your genset, you can move on to the Data and Reports page. Now what this page provides are three important reports. The first is a project sizing report that provides all of the genset, engine, and technical information for the program selected generator set. The second report is a project load report that talks about all the loads that you as a user have added in the load sequence that you've added them. And the third report is a transit performance report. In that report, it'll tell you two different things. It'll tell you about the load step, the size of genset. That'd be the top half of that report. The bottom half would be some technical information about the program selected genset, about its transit response at 25% load change increments. Okay, so some important information about transit response about the genset. Okay, so another thing I want to mention here that you get that's new with reporting is before, with the old tool SpecSizer windows, you could only print a report as a PDF, but now we provided some capability to not only do PDFs, but you can print a report as Excel or as a Microsoft Word document. So it would be editable. So now they're editable, and that guide spec that I talked about that you can create on the Select Genset page, it's editable as well. So all these help you with a project. When you're putting together your project details, you want to make sure that it's editable and not a PDF.
Now we're going to talk a little bit about file sharing, and this is the Shared With Me page. Can you tell us about it?
Sure, Edgar. This is a new feature that we've got, and what that is, instead of emailing your sizing file to anybody in the world that has computer access, now what you do is you share the file. All SpecSizer web files are on the Caterpillar server. They're secure, and the only people that can see your file are people that you shared your file with. And in the next slide here, I'll show you how you share that file, but it's a new feature. And again, it just, you don't have to send your file to anybody. You don't have to email it. You just share that file. So let's go ahead and move forward here, and I'll talk about how you do that.
Okay.
In any file that you create, you've got a list of files and folders that you've created. There's a command called Edit, and you just simply click on that Edit command, and you can add a user's email address. The first time you add that user, it'll add their email address into a library of email addresses that you create. Again, only you see that library of email addresses that you created. But at any point in time, you can move that user in that library over to the right-hand side, the right-hand block here, and that's the users that you share this particular file with.
Give them access.
Yeah, give them access. And then they can see your file. What happens is they get an email that notifies them that you shared a file with them, and it gives them then access to go in and look at that file. Now, I want to make sure that everyone understands that it would be a read-only file. It wouldn't be editable. You cannot edit a file that's shared with you. However, you can rename that file and edit it. So this just shows you how you share a file, and it shows you the library of user email names of people that you shared files with.
So now we're taking a look at the My Loads page. What's that about?
Right. Remember we talked before about template or library loads. It's a new feature in SpecSizer Web. And this just simply shows all of those library loads that you've added to the tool. It's an easy access to get to those different library loads. Now, just want to mention recent projects here. This is just simply a way to get to all the projects that you saved within the tool. Okay, one thing I do want to talk about here, make sure that a user would understand, is that like with any other application, there's a way that you can copy, move, delete a file, and here's where you would use that. You would use that functionality here. Okay, for any project that you've created. Okay. Now we've been through the 4 different pages to create a file, and we've talked about the new features, navigation features. And I just want to kind of skip over quickly here, again, some of the new features that we've got in the tool that I think are value added for the customer. And again, one of those is the region selection. Before it was hard-coded, you would install a region in SpecSizer and you couldn't change it. But now, say if you're a customer in North America and you're working a project, say in the Middle East, then you can reset your region to the Middle East, and then you can align with the genset availability in that region. So that's kind of important. The other thing is the postal code reporting. That's important because there's a way that we need to assemble people together in the actual regions that they're in, and that way if we'd have an inquiry, if we have a question, we can more readily address that user's question and sort of bucket them into the appropriate region. Now, I did touch on expansion capacity before. That's an important feature. I've seen projects, I've been managing SpecSizer for about 7 or 8 years here, and there have been times that I've seen a project that was, say, about 98.7% loaded, and why would you spec, install, commission a generator set that was fully loaded? So here's a way that you can add growth capacity to a site, and you can add up to 30%. So it's an important feature that looks at linear versus nonlinear, that looks at motor versus motor, and it grows that site proportionally to those ratios. And one thing that we want to make sure that we look at here too is that we never add this expansion capacity if the genset is lightly loaded, because that's a condition called wet stacking. And we don't want to get a user into a situation like that, okay? Now here again, we're looking at the library loads that we talked about earlier. I just want to mention that we've got some new load types, value-added load types that we've added to SpecSizer Web. We didn't have them for SpecSizer Windows. We've revised our generic or our user-defined UPS, but we've also added a cat battery UPS load, and we've added a cat flywheel UPS load. And so this is just to provide options for all of our customers who may want something other than some generic UPS. A lot of opportunity there on UPS for customers. The Optimize My Loads, that's actually what we call the wizard in the old SpecSizer Windows tool. In all the years of working SpecSizer inquiries, I would see so many times if the user would just simply have run the wizard, the recommended genset could have been downsized. And so what we do now is we'll run the wizard or the optimizer all the time in the background. And what the optimizer does is finds the smallest genset based upon program logic, and it also finds the least number of load steps for loads that the user has entered into the program. So it's a great feature. Again, it runs in the background all the time, and the user will be notified if an optimized scenario is possible, and then they can just go look at it and make a choice, make a decision on whether they want to accept that smaller genset or not. Okay, the other thing is the template loads, the library loads. We think that's a great feature. Again, you mentioned that it's a time-saving feature for the customer, and you know, that's what we want to do. We want to save the user time. So we talked about the compare selected, up to 35 new features, technical information that you can look at, and we talked about the data and reports and how it's important to be able to edit all that information and data if you want to.
Stephen, a lot of good information today, and then you do want to remind everyone that if they ever have any questions or concerns, help is always available.
That's exactly right. We do have a link here that we provide. It's called SpecSizer support@cat.com. Any user can create an inquiry and get that to us real time, and we'll respond real time. And we think that's important to provide that kind of customer support. So that's the link, SpecSizer support@cat.com. With that inquiry, you actually get to me. So yeah, we want to make sure that we provide the type of customer service support for SpecSizer that ensures that the customer gets all the help that they need.
The tool can be found at specsizer.cat.com. Stephen, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Edgar. Appreciate your time.